The first thing that happens in this scene is Harry is punished for the snake.
Right.
And that's quite amusing because he's not allowed out of his cupboard
Yes.
for weeks and weeks until the end of until the summer holidays, in fact. So one wonders what in normal times he's actually allowed or not allowed to do. It's not as if he's not allowed out of the house. It's as a punishment. He's not actually allowed out of the cupboard. Presumably.
Oh my goodness, that hadn't even occurred to me.
Yeah. Now,
so he's just stuck in his cupboard for weeks.
Well, that's what she says, and in fact, it fits very well with the cartoon nature of the Dursleys, because this whole chapter is about the Dursleys and the boringness of the Dursleys under attack.
Yes.
And what we see...
The Dursleys under siege.
Yeah. What we see at the beginning of the scene is the sequel to the previous scene where the snake was allowed to escape. And it's clear that they are defending themselves by locking Harry up and trying to prevent any further unruly behaviour on his part.
Yes, Harry's the enemy within the family, but now there's an enemy outside the family.
Absolutely. And the fact of the matter is that having locked him into the cupboard, he's now allowed out. And it's at that point that we start to see the contrast between what's planned for Dudley's education and what's planned for Harry's education.
Dudley's going to the private school that Vernon went to, and he's got his new uniform. Harry is going to local comprehensive, and Petunia's boiling him a disgusting uniform that's not really a uniform, as Dudley's hand-me-downs that she's dyeing grey.
Yes, and amusingly there, you think to yourself, why? And it's clear that Petunia is wanting to assault his status and his self-worth and to humiliate him. Yeah. So she's unnecessarily giving him Dudley's offcasts at the wrong size.
Yes.
They're going to hang on him like, I think he says, the wrinkled skin of an elephant.
Yes, terrible image.
And on top of that, we've got the idea that he is going there specifically to be humiliated. That's what they plan for him. Now, this is all cartoon stuff. It really is very much in the tradition of, I don't know, Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner and Tom and Jerry. This is, and think about Dudley, the clothes he's going to wear. What was it? A maroon tailcoat, orange knickerbockers, and a knobbly stick for whacking each other with.
To build character or whatever it is.
So
it is, but it's got a real sting in it that really, as a child, you really, that feeling that Harry has is so.
You can empathise.
You can really empathise with him, and there's something really visceral about. They've just seen Dudley have his little fashion show, and Vernon's blubbering away. Like, it's the proudest day of my life as he's, Dudley stood there.
Yes, Dudleykins.
and then Harry comes downstairs or comes out of his cupboard into the kitchen the next morning, and there's the terrible stink of the clothes being boiled, this awful smell. And it's like, even though it's cartoonish, there's something so vindictive about the way they treat him. So cruel.
Absolutely. It really emphasises the cartoon in this case is very effective in showing exactly how he is. And it's amusing because, in fact, the clothes that Dudley is going to be wearing, the maroon tailcoat, the knickerbockers, are actually more ridiculous than the clothes that are planned for Harry. But for Dudley, it's high status, and for Harry, it's planned to be complete humiliation.
Yes. I wrote down uniform as one of the sort of symbols in this chapter. Because it seems like Dudley's putting on these clothes to kind of follow in Vernon's footsteps, and the clothes, they're sort of sending Dudley off into this new world where he's going to belong. He's belonging, new identity, amalgamation into this collective, a new phase. He's being sort of sent off by his parents, and it's a wonderful. It's kind of, the scene is really disgusting to Harry and to us, but it's this kind of rite of passage that Dudley's got, and the uniform kind of encapsulates all that. And then there's Harry, who, because his parents aren't there, hasn't got this uniform and isn't being ushered into any kind of next phase. And this kind of, I guess, is only picked up later in Diagon Alley, where he actually gets his robes. And he's kind of given his clothes that finally fit him. They're his clothes with his name in them. And he can go and be with people who he belongs with. But in this chapter, he's just... the future looks grim.
Absolutely. I mean, the story that this is about is Cinderella.
Yes.
He's the one who has to do the cooking. He's the one who is living in the hole under the stairs. He has been turned into a servant, and these are his, in some sense, step-parents.
Yes.
Although in this case it's adoptive. But it's the Cinderella story. Dudley's going to the ball, and Harry is going to be left out. And as I say, it's presented in a very cartoonish way and very funny. I mean, you can't help but laugh at the peacock pride of the Dursleys, who are absolutely wedded to boringness.
Yes.
And yet they want to dress Dudley up in this...
It's a really funny chapter. I mean, to be honest, we're starting the episode on a bit of a sad note, but the chapter itself was making me laugh as I was reading it the whole way through, the escalation of Uncle Vernon's sort of, his decline into kind of insanity, and the way Dudley's whacking everything with his smell-thing stick. So it's like the tone of the chapter is very light and funny, but I mean, when you kind of look at it, it's terrible what the Dursleys do to Harry.
Yeah, it's as you say, it's very funny, and you have to take this really as something that as the Dursleys would see it. Put yourself into the Dursley mindset. They're looking for boringness. They're looking for. They're aspiring to join the middle class. They're sending Dudley off to school.
They're real conformists.
Yeah, that's right. And they're prepared to do any ridiculous thing to get up that sort of ladder. And they're fighting back against magic by locking him in the under the stairs. And they seem to be succeeding. They've got his humiliation planned. We're going along very well from a Dursley point of view, to the point where the first letter arrives. And it's at that point, when Harry walks in with the letter, that the Dursleys suddenly get their first setback. And their first, Vernon's first, from his standpoint, his first instinct is to go into denial. So he says, ignore it, they'll stop. Little does he know. Then he tries to exclude the external influence. So he's nailing up the letterbox, blocking all the
possible entry points,
the doors, and of course he forgets about the chimney. He's happy that it's Sunday, so there'll be no mail, and then suddenly, boop, 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 boop,
yes.
Out of machine gunning out of the fireplace come all these letters for Harry.
Yeah.
And at this point, having tried to fortify themselves and keep things out, they now are in retreat. They're running away.
And I think that's the major theme of the chapter, really, is like concealment versus revelation, or isolation versus contact. Like saying that they've been trying to keep Harry sort of in this little box the entire, his entire
life,
childhood.
Yes.
And these letters are really a major threat to not just, I don't know, it's like a threat to the family unit. It's a threat to them.
Yes, it's the other, the outside world, of magic, and the opposite of boringness.
I mean, I don't know if I've done this the wrong way. I mean, I was thinking about the house, the actual number 4 Privet Drive, as a sort of symbol in this chapter as well, in terms of concealment versus revelation, because the house is used as a way to hide secrets, hide the Dursley secrets. And then as the house is, it's like it's barriers and its boundaries against the outside world. You know, the Dursleys are like very private at the same time as, you know, Petunia loves spying on the neighbours and gossiping all about them. That they themselves want to keep all their secrets and want to keep Harry hidden away. And so it's kind of like, as the house sort of ceases to be a structure that can protect them, they have to get out of the house. And I think what happens is Vernon sort of takes the family unit, just sort of transplants them into the car, and then they're just kind of mobile for the rest of the chapter, moving from setting to setting. And so it's kind of like, I thought the house, it kind of reminds me of like a storytelling technique, but it's like when the fetters or like the objects in the narrative cease to fulfill their function, the deeper you get into the plot. And so it's like the Privet Drive was fulfilling its function as a building, and then we hit this chapter and it's like the house itself ceases to kind of live up to, it ceases to be able to protect Vernon, and it kind of almost collapsing under the weight of the secret of Harry. And so it's sort of, they have to flee, they have to run, but the letters are just going to follow them everywhere. But I thought the letters sort of seemed like the Furies from Greek mythology. Is it Greek?
Absolutely,
where
yes.
It's like, no, you can go to the ends of the earth, and it feels like when they get to the island in the sea, it feels like something on the end of the edge of the earth. It's like, no matter where Vernon goes, no matter what he tries to do, the Furies of that something that's going to proclaim truth is going to be heard.
I want to go back and say a little bit more about the cartoonish nature of the thing.
Please, yes.
As they're getting into the car, it's very funny because Dudley is trying to pack his television and his games, PlayStation and all the various different things into it. And the idea that he's frantically packing all this stuff into his kit bag is really amusing. Then when they go to the island and they find this rowing boat and the extreme discomfort of the place that they get to.
Mouldy old sofa. Yes.
Damp blankets
bed.
and of course Petunia's busy making up a bed on the
sofa
for Duddykins. Very funny.
The letter, yes. So like fleeing, hiding, evading, but keeping the family composed.
Yes, he's under pressure, but his defensive. He thinks he's in control.
Yes.
He doesn't realise what he's up against at all.
As a British archetype, don't you think that Uncle Vernon's, there's something familiar about how he responds to these threats, to this threat and pressure? Like, there's something kind of repressed, and he just reminds me of like a portrait of a British man who's like engaged in some kind of feud with his neighbour or something. It's like, oh, so he thinks he'll be able to get one over on me, does he? And this sort of like repressed way of going about it while kind of going a bit mad, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we start off in denial. We then create a defensive periphery, which, when it's breached, we then retreat.
This is great.
And the retreat then develops into a rout and a flight.
And when he's like, double back, shake them off, you know, when he's like...
he's driving and
like
he's trying
it's some sort of military operation.
Exactly. So I think that's absolutely from his point of view, he sees himself in that, and you can see him. So he's arming himself, and he's trying to set himself up in isolation in a place with a moat,
yes.
So they can't get there by sea, and
But it's like a sort of silent struggle. Like the forces he's up against are madness to him.
yes,
And so, but he's sort of locked in this sort of duel with whoever's writing these letters. And in fact, I'm pretty sure there's no one particular person, as far as I know, who's actually sending the letters. It's from, or is it McGonagall?
I think it's probably from Dumbledore.
It's
from the school.
It's from the
official
school, but he's like got this enemy who he's in like a battle of wits with.
Yes.
But it's completely one-sided.
Then the other person who you need to think a bit about is Dudley, because Dudley is being spoiled as usual.
Yes.
He's being given his stuff. He's broken all his
Birthday
gifts, and he's being given the uniform, the smelting stick, all of that sort of stuff. And for him, things are going along very much as normal.
And it's like wonderful from his perspective that Harry is going to be a freak at his new school. Like that just makes Dudley's position all the kind of sweeter.
Exactly. But suddenly, as the defences start being breached, Dudley is suddenly excluded. First of all, they won't show him the letters. Then, poor fellow loses his second bedroom. Then he loses his. He throws his tantrums, all the various bits and pieces.
He throws his turtle through the greenhouse roof, the roof of the conservatory. Or something.
Yes. Next morning at breakfast, everyone was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He'd screamed, whacked his father with his smelting stick, been sick on purpose, kicked his mother and thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and he still didn't have his room back.
So for the first time in his life, he's being told no.
Yes. So that's very 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 interesting.
I actually thought that brought him and Harry onto a more kind of equal footing, as almost like as brothers, kind of, because they both get thrown out of the kitchen and they're both sort of scrambling to listen at the door. And it's like, Dudley speaks to Harry during the chapter saying like, who on earth wants to speak to you this badly? And it's like, because Dudley is as shut out as Harry is, it kind of
yes, exactly,
makes things equal between them a little bit more.
The interesting thing is that he blames his father. So what we're seeing is a fracture in the in the Dursleys, which is caused by this external pressure. He starts to think that his father is losing it. And
Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he?
Yes. Then the same thing tends to apply to Petunia, because she starts out being active in this. So she's taking Dudley to get his smelting's uniform. She's dyeing Harry's uniform and things like that. And suddenly these letters arrive and she's in a very secondary position. She starts to say things like, well, they know where he sleeps.
Yes, they all have to start treating Harry a little bit more, nicely, because it's like they're watching how badly we've been treating him this whole time.
But when the when the fusillade of letters comes through the chimney or through the fireplace, she runs out and covers her face. It's left to Vernon to deal with it. And when they're driving in the car, she doesn't dare ask where they're going.
Yes, and when she finally asks, she says, when she finally tries to talk Vernon round, she's like, wouldn't it be better to just go home, dear? She says timidly.
And he appears not to hear her. He just ignores what she's saying. So in the end, this pressure from outside is driving a huge wedge and fracturing the unity of the Dursleys, which is rather good stuff.
Yes. I mean, when I was thinking about the different characters over the course of the chapter, I was wondering about Vernon taking the kind of lead in the conflict, as opposed to Petunia, who sort of recedes into the back and goes a bit quiet. And I was wondering why that. I mean, obviously it just naturally flows out that way because it's comical. But I also think it's the contrast that will come in chapter 4 when Petunia's finally, just unloads all of the secrets she's been holding on to about how she feels about Lily and the world of magic. So it works in this chapter that she's kind of kept back a bit so that Vernon can kind of.
Well, it is interesting, but if you think back to chapter 1, where it was Vernon who was, we saw the chapter 1 mostly in Vernon's viewpoint. He was going to work, he was seeing the owls or not seeing the owls. He saw the cat, he didn't see the cat. All of those sorts of things. But when he comes home, he's actually quite timid because he says he doesn't want to ask her or suggest because
he doesn't want to upset her.
He doesn't want to upset her. He doesn't want her to shriek at him. And so it's clear that the relationship between the two of them is in some form reciprocal, that he leads in some things.
Yes.
He leads. To some extent, it's a traditional male-female role division.
Yes.
Because he manages the external world, and
she's very domestic.
And she manages Harry when he's inside. So, seeing this, it seems to me that that's a continuation of that trend from the beginning. But she's lost a lot because in this first chapter, Vernon is actually quite frightened of her, I think. He doesn't want to upset her. He doesn't want to get her angry. He doesn't want to... he doesn't even really dare mention her relatives. Here, it's clear that Vernon has taken the bit between his teeth.
Yes.
And the external pressure he's responding to, he's just ignoring her.
Yeah, he's sort of just like picked an imaginary target, really, and just, going for it, just charging at it.
Absolutely.
Or charging away from it.
We talked about the Dursleys. What we haven't said very much about is Harry in this lot. And Harry's still, to an extent, I think, Harry's still passive. He's not really in a position where he has the confidence to do anything very much. He follows along. He wishes that he didn't have to wear this elephant hide uniform. He wishes that people would come and fetch him. He laughs. He finds it all fairly amusing. But he's not, in this chapter at least, he's not in any way really active. He doesn't take a leading role in any of the things that are happening.
When I was thinking just on the top, the only note I had for Harry had to do with tone in the chapter, and I sort of thought there's that line where they've arrived at the gloomy hotel on the outskirts of a big city, where Harry sort of stays awake while Dudley sleeps and Harry looks out the window at the cars on the motorway. That felt like a tone. The rest of the chapter has been kind of comical in its tone, but that felt like a real moment of like Harry's kind of interiority, where he's reflecting and sort of thinking, well, who is this who's trying to, there's all this chaos that's kind of swirled up from all the letters coming, but this is a sort of pause in the action where Harry's reflecting.
Yes, that's interesting because we are with Harry on that one. We don't really understand. We don't know exactly what he's going to do.
We don't know who this person is, who is writing, who knows, who does see what Harry is going through. They see that he's been in the cupboard, they see he gets moved to the upstairs bedroom, and it's like, it's something, someone is writing to him personally, and it's sort of, for the first time ever, he's singled out and acknowledged.
Exactly. So I think we're starting to see Harry as an individual. We're certainly seeing it from his point of view. Now remember, this comes back to why I wanted to watch the scene in the film, because
we just watched the opening of Philosopher's Stone.
Having watched the opening of Philosopher's Stone, you can see they've got the first scene with Dumbledore, nothing about the Dursleys. Then we've got the scene in the zoo with the snake escaping. And so if you think about the way that they've picked up on the film, we don't see the Dursleys very clearly until this scene, because we've got, from chapter 1, simply the arrival of Harry, Hagrid, and Harry as a baby being dumped on the doorstep.
Dumped that's a strong word, Dad. Dumbledore lovingly placed the little bundle with its letter.
Very good.
He dumped.
Being lovingly deposited on the doorstep. Then the second scene,
Dumbledore.
We're starting to see a little bit more of the character of the Dursleys.
Dump with the door. Sorry. Dump that door. Okay. Sorry.
So in the second scene is the escape of the snake, and clearly at this point we see the contrast between the Dursleys and Harry. But the third chapter, which is this one, it majors on the arrival of the letters and the flight and the attempt to defend the house. They get towards the car, and then they're straight onto the island, where we see them asleep. So,
which makes some sense.
Oh,
can I cut in just for a second? Because I was reading the Robert McKee book Story, which is specifically about screenwriting, and I was going through thinking, a scene is made up of these beats, and it's an action and a reaction. There's an antagonist, there's a person who has a desire that the antagonist is, thwarting, and then there's a turn and a sort of reversal of the charge of the scene. I don't know if I'm just sort of butchering that explanation.
Keep going.
And so what I realised, I was sort of like, okay, so the first beat would be the letter arrives, and then, we've got Vernon's reaction to that. Then we've got the second beat, and I was like, well, I guess that's when the next letters arrive. And as I went on through the scene, I was sort of thinking, no, actually, this isn't a new beat. It's the same action. It's the same beat again and again with kind of an escalation, but it's actually the same intent is behind the letters as a device. So it makes some sense to just sort of, okay, they're out the house, they've taken drastic action, let's just cut straight to the island, because it's really kind of, who drives the scene and makes it happen? What do they want? And it's kind of like, well, the letter writer wants the same thing again and again and again and again, which is just to make contact with Harry. And so there's escalation in terms of Vernon's sort of devolving. But once they leave the house, he's kind of on a
oh yes,
flat line of crazy. It's not. I suppose actually him getting the gun is escalating things.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter that we don't see the gun in this particular case. They have to abridge it really a lot because the film's long anyway, and so therefore we see the essence. We see Vernon growing more and more desperate, and the various different attempts he makes to defend them, and then you have the kind of transition to flight.
Yes, and there's like the false relief of like, well, it's Sunday, so nothing's going to happen, and then the explosion of the letters, which is a nice way to cap that scene, just it sends them out the door.
Absolutely, and it sends them out the door, and that's all that you really need for that scene. So they have captured the essence of it, and particularly the panic in the Dursley family. What they don't show you is what I was talking about earlier, which is the way in which the family unit starts to fragment under the pressure, and it starts to crack. The difference between the impact it has on the relationship between Dudley and his parents, and the impact that it has on the relationship between Vernon and Petunia.
Yes.
And that they've had to kind of go. That has had to go by the board in the abridging that they've necessarily had to do to get everything into the film. So, what conclusions if we were preaching a sermon, I was thinking about your friends, the religious people who were preaching a sermon.
I was telling Dad about Harry Potter and the Sacred Text podcast.
The Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. And I was thinking about what lessons would you actually draw from this thing if you were
That's interesting.
using it as a text in a service? So first of all, there's something about karma, that basically you reap what you sow. So the Dursleys have been very, very nasty indeed to Harry, and that has stored up for them this complete discombobulation and destruction of their world, and his karma, their karma is coming back to them. The second thing that we learn is that good triumphs. I mean, in this particular thing, the evil Dursleys are really going to be are really being punished. And then we have something about the Beatitudes, blessed are the meek, because Harry has really done very, very little. He has simply borne nobly and stoically the troubles that have come to him, and he is therefore being rewarded for his noble forbearance in the thing. So it would say, except as to coin a phrase, render unto Caesar that which is of Caesar. Basically, you're being asked here, in this sense, not to take revenge and to take up arms and have a conscious revenge against these people, but simply to wait, and fate will sort things out for you.
Well, does that mean, I don't know the Bible as well, is that like Caesar is the sort of mundane world, and so you have to just
yes, they
give way to the tyrants in the mundane world?
Well, basically they came to Jesus and they set him a trap question, which was, should we pay tax to Rome? And that there wasn't a right answer to that question, because if he said, yes, you should pay tax to Rome, then he was showing himself to be disloyal to the Jewish to the Jewish culture and siding with the oppressor. And if he said no, then the Romans would lock him up.
Right.
So he got a coin, and he looked at the coin and he said, whose head's on this? And they said, Caesar's. So he said, well, you rendered to Caesar.
I see.
Yeah, that's how it worked. But Harry in this is still not ready. He's waiting. He's latent. His powers are there, but he's not ready yet to be active.
Yes, and it seems like the other lesson might be for Vernon. It's sort of a sorcerer's apprentice situation with the broomsticks. From Fantasia, where you chop one up with an axe, and it splinters, become a load more brooms. Is that right? I haven't watched Fantasia in ages, and so it's kind of like Vernon. The more he's squirming and struggling and fighting to get out, the worse and worse and worse it's becoming.
Exactly. If he'd let Harry have the letter in the first letter, none of this would have happened. So he's really is doing a King Canute.
I suppose I just wanted to say about Hagrid as sort of the sort of threat that the letters pose is kind of given form in the form of Hagrid, and so at the very end of the chapter, there's a storm that's whipped up. The little hut is just like being battered and everything in the middle of this ocean, and from the sort of sounds of the storm, there comes these noises that Harry keeps thinking, are those footsteps, or is that just the sea slapping on the rock, or is that some, he keeps personifying sounds from outside that, as we obviously know, is Hagrid coming towards the door. And it's sort of like, as far as the writing technique, it's like the elemental power of the storm is manifested in Hagrid, and he's like that idea of the Furies with the letter. It's finally kind of like come to this crescendo of this giant, it's not even a normal sized person, smashing down the door, at the end, and it's like, it sounds like it's nature, it's a force of nature, but then it's like boom, 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 these knocks on the door that that's really like the hand of the Fury is like about to come
yes,
down on
although
them.
remember that actually at the ending of the chapter we haven't seen Hagrid,
No,
so it
no.
is actually left on a cliffhanger.
Yes.
Literally on a cliff.
Yes, but it's like it's an unseen someone, just like the letters
Yes.
are from an unseen someone.
Yes, we're still faced with the mystery, and interestingly enough, we don't actually get any view of what the Dursleys are thinking about this, because presumably they've also been awakened by this boom boom on the door, and maybe even have been awake, waiting, trying to sleep with the storm raging around them.
Yes. I guess if I could say about the point on the pacing and the kind of setting, which I kind of think we covered earlier, but the kind of running, it moves from Privet Drive, and then it's this very dynamic kind of scene cuts of like, it's comical where it's like he stops in the middle of a suspension bridge, stops in the middle of a ploughed field, stopping in all these different places so that it's jump cuts from in these different bizarre places that Uncle Vernon's getting out the car and kind of sizing it up like, is this going to be a place nobody can deliver a letter to, before he kind of decides to get back in the car and drive them. And then he locks the rest of the family in the car.
He actually locks them into the car while he goes and negotiates for this for the fortress on the island.
That is very kind of British dad in a way. You know what I mean? Like, family, stay there. Like that does remind me of a sort of archetype of like a stressed patriarch of the.
I suppose that's also a reflection of how J.K. sees the patriarchy, that basically she at this point must have been feeling pretty helpless. Yes, that locking the family into the car and having Vernon take over, leaving the rest of the family impotent, unable to do anything, powerless.
Just sort of what is he going to do next? Just waiting for him
to do something. That's a very close reflection, I suspect, of the sensation of helplessness that J.K. was feeling as she wrote this, because it was early in the book, she hadn't really got into it yet, and she probably didn't even know whether she'd ever finish the book, I guess.
But I guess, couldn't you sort of flip that into she's sort of delighting in the chaos and sort of stress that a change in her own circumstances in a magical way would cause the forces who are trying to
very much
keep
so.
her down.
Yes, this is her dream scenario.
Yeah, so she sat there in the back with Harry, as we are. It's like,
yeah, it's
sort of a really nice position to be in. You just get to sort of sit and watch Vernon unravel. What is the theme? I mean, as I said, I thought it was like concealment versus revelation, and sort of the struggle against that being revealed. But do you see any themes otherwise in the chapter?
Well, as I say, the karma thing, the fact that
yes.
they built that up, I think that's one of the themes. The theme of Harry's forbearance, his stoicism, that's another.
Yeah.
And the growing chaos of the external world impinging on the control of the Dursleys in Privet Drive. And finally they leave that security, and at that point they think they're running away, but actually they're running towards the final destruction of their attempts to knock the magic out of Harry.
Yes, and sort of fleeing and denying is just making it worse and worse.
Yes.
And the fact that it feels like a force of nature, it's like divine justice.
Yes, it is exactly that.
Why, can I just ask you, why do you think that J.K. Rowling picked really drab locations for them to flee? You know, they go to the hotel. Why is it so drab?
Because that's what they're looking for. The Dursleys are the apostles of boringness, and so they want to flee to a boring location. They want to go to places that where they can blend in. So the fact that they go to this rather drab hotel, the fact that they go down on a motorway, all of these artificial human constructions of a boring nature fit perfectly with the Dursleys' ideals.
It's like they're kind of grabbing onto talismans of normalness to sort of ward off that force. That's brilliant, but it's causing them a lot of. It's not like they're enjoying any of it. They're eating the horrible cold tinned tomato on toast breakfast at the hotel, and Dudley's suffering horribly. Their own child is suffering. So it's like,
Oh, absolutely. But then
they're inflicting it. It's sort of a
they're inflicting on themselves a load of difficulties which are completely unnecessary. But it's because they refuse to accept the numinous external world of magic
and the new things that it's like there's a cracking open that's happening, and they're in narrative terms sort of running to different locations that are trying to keep them in one realm. Like it's like they're being forced through the threshold into the next phase of the story, and they're fleeing to these places to escape it, but it's just not going to work.
And it's interesting too, because if you think about it, they live in an artificial man-made world, a synthetic world almost, which has been created by humanity to keep the forces of nature out. They're driven from that world. They try and find shelter within it, but in the end, like King Lear going out onto the blasted heath.
I was going to say like Adam and Eve being cast out of.
They cast out of their. They cast out of their Ersatz Eden, and they end up in the natural world, in the middle of a storm, on an island where they are completely powerless, because their strength has failed. Their protection caused or generated by their mundane world has been completely broken down.
Yes, everything they were benefiting from up until now is just crumbling. This might be a bit of a reach, but you know how the letters fly? Like how are the letters getting there? Like sometimes from the postman, sometimes. I suppose, do they actually fly, or is that just from the film that I've just got in my head?
I think the film. I mean, the film implies that there are owls bringing them, and that they then post them in.
And we know, like Hagrid flies to get to the island.
But the first letter, at the very least, is brought by the postman because it comes with the other three letters. After that, we don't know. Certainly, when the letters start coming in under the door and down the chimney,
rolled up in the eggs,
or rolled up or in the eggs and things like that, that's magic. It's nothing to do with postman. That.
Yes, and so this might be a bit of a tenuous thing, but it's like it feels like the Muggles, the Dursleys are very kind of like earth-bound, and so they're sort of using the car to escape, and it's like they're finally driven to kind of go over the water in the boat, but it's like the power of the flight. It's like this supernatural force that's just inescapable.
That's right. I like the fact that the letters were written on parchment. It's very posh stuff, and it's coming from another richer world, a richer culture than the Dursleys actually know about. So we are seeing a contrast between the ordinary boringness of the Dursleys and the magical world that Harry belongs to. Yes,
and this is getting a bit ahead, but thinking about Diagon Alley, where I was just reading that chapter, and the things Harry sees, occasionally he sort of thinks, oh, if Dudley was here, he'd be doing this or X, Y, Z, but it's like it's a world of riches that the Dursleys can never enter, because they're the kind of people who do all this crazy stuff to run away from magic.
Yes, and it's clear that you can't blame Petunia for being how she is, because Lily, her sister, was different. And did we talk about this last time? The idea of competing with someone who's dead is you're onto a loser.
Yes. And I was thinking just what you said at the beginning about Petunia when she's boiling the uniform, and it's not enough that Dudley gets to go to the posh private school. It's that, and I was thinking, why couldn't she just get Harry the uniform? It's not going to be expensive. Why couldn't she just let him go off and she wouldn't have to have much to do with him? But it's that she has to kind of twist the knife, she has to...
exactly.
Because it's a vengeance thing.
Yes, they are.
She's sort of playing out on Harry what she wants to do to Lily, I suppose, or
yes.
what she wished.
It's about his self-image. It's about his importance in the world. She wants to assert her and her family is the primacy of herself and her family. And Harry is a symbol of the world that she wants to put down.
That is just so rich for the storytelling, and it's like that's touched on quite lightly here, really, but it's so deep what you say there. Like that's really going to be throughout the whole books. That kind of conflict.
That's right, and in some ways, it's that sense of inferiority that also drives Tom Riddle and to become Voldemort and so on.
He tries to sort of destroy his former self, as in wipe who he was from anybody's memories. He wants to kind of efface that past self who didn't know all this magic and was weak or vulnerable at any point.
So it is. Yeah, it's very sad. The way in which the baddies in these stories develop is actually very sad, because you see something of the problems that they have had and the reasoning behind why they have turned bad.
I can say one point about that parchment that you mentioned, and it's like that's Dumbledore, really. Like when I think about that parchment, it sort of symbolises it's from Hogwarts, and it sort of just has this feeling of like, everything that waits is summed up in that parchment, and it's sort of like the letter is this bigger sense of justice than there's like in the microcosm of number 4 Privet Drive. There's only it's their way or the highway. It's just this relief to know that it just feels like in the letter there's a justice and a sort of like a judge, like Dumbledore. I don't know if I'm wrong in connecting them, but he sort of, there's somebody who's really wise and sort of has this sight of this ability to see everything that's going on and weigh everything up and sort of put it all to rights. Is how it feels. That's kind of how the letters feel in a way. Like,
yes, I think you're right.
They can see Harry.
What you have is a sort of godlike omnipotence, which is weighing in the interest of justice, and to an extent, that is what Dumbledore represents. He is the deity in this whole story. All right, well,
we'll pick up with Chapter 4 in the next episode then.
The Keeper of the Keys. Yeah, we meet Hagrid, and we see him the intense discomfiture that he forces on poor old Dursleys.
Yes,
you have to feel sorry for them.
Yeah, isn't it crazy how he instantly just like hates Dudley on sight? gives him the pigtail. He just like takes the measure of him at a glance.
Yes.